turns out that Wellington has been at the forefront of future mobility for 85 years. This is my great-great-aunt Sara Stace. She was a resident of Wellington, and she was with her electric car right down on the wharf in 1937. She was crippled by polio as a child, and this is her way of getting around the city. And that's with her dog Fluffy and her car Atalanta, which I think is in a nearby museum. So let's get on to climate change. We are in an absolute climate catastrophe, something that my great-great-aunt Eileen could never have anticipated. I studied architecture at school, and we had to very much look at massing, thermal massing of building materials like brick and concrete. And the ocean, water, is a very, very heavy mass. And it does not heat and cool quickly. And so here we are with an ocean temperature that is boiling. And that is not going to turn around anytime soon. This is the cry for help from our planet, saying we are in very, very big trouble right now. So, are we responding enough to this crisis? On the left are the safe operating zones for all sorts of different parts of our biosphere. Climate change has gone well beyond. Ozone has come back. We have proven that it can be done. But there are other components as well. If you're interested, you can look up that guidance document. But we're well beyond our planetary boundaries on a whole number of fronts. I think the problem is that housing, the type of housing that we provide and the type of development that we have in our cities locks people into climate impact for their entire lives. So I'm comparing Alicia and Zara. Alicia lives in a suburban location. She's going to spend her whole life dependent on the car. She's dependent not just on the car, but for someone to drive that car for her when she's a child. And then when she becomes an adult, she gets her driver's license as soon as she can. And then 10 years later, she now has to drive her kid around. And so that kid's dependent on her. And then as she approaches her later years, she can no longer drive and she becomes dependent on others. She's not autonomous for her whole life. But furthermore, if you look on there, she's 30 years old today. When we look at the net zero requirement in 2050, she's still driving. We are locking people into a lifetime where they cannot do anything else. And then on the bottom we've got Zara. She lives in a more compact development. She can walk and cycle and catch public transport. And so she is not doing 90% of her household emissions on transport. And that is our requirement. That is how we're going to address climate. This is a piece of work that Infrastructure Victoria in Australia released recently. This shows that more compact cities do have less greenhouse gas emissions compared to other development types. And some other things they found which are really important to keep in mind. One is, obviously, as we said, fewer greenhouse gas emissions, less use of land. Now this is really important because land that is not built on can then be used for rewilding. It can be there for vegetation, and Wellington's hills are just gorgeous and full of biodiversity and vegetation, and it's holding the carbon in that soil. It also allows more people choices. We talked about the big one, more affordable infrastructure. Infrastructure Victoria study showed that just that one state alone, they will save over $40 billion because they don't have to build more roads, more schools, more hospitals, more GPs out in far-flung suburbs. It's much more compact and therefore saves an enormous amount of money. Some study that I did when I was at Transport for New South Wales, the state government, was we looked at what actually makes places walkable. What we did is we looked at about 80 different strategic centres around New South Wales, from urban through to regional towns. We looked at 129 geospatial data sets and then ran a massive artificial intelligence model to look at basically a multiple linear regression analysis for the words in the room. But essentially what that did is looked at what actually causes people to walk. And we found that these factors here up on the board, if you have 10 people out on the street, 6 of them are here for these reasons. And they are density. You've got people living and working in medium density, and we found a really key tipping point. If you've got less than 30% single dwellings, walking suddenly rockets up. We're looking at 30% maximum single dwellings. And beyond that, it can be semi-detached terrace houses. It doesn't have to be high-rise. It just needs to not be single dwellings. And obviously you need jobs as well. The second component is lots of things to see and do. That's basically mixed use. So you can't have homogenous residential development because there's nowhere to go. You need a GP, a chemist, a pool, a post office, all these things to see and do. The third component is what urbanists like to call permeability, basically fine-grained streets. And again, part of that is because it gives people lots of crossing opportunities, and part of it is because if you've got lots of things to see and do, you can create different permutations of your walking route. And that's really important because people like to combine things. So they might pop into the bakery, drop the kids at school, drop at the GP, go to the chemist, and put all these trip-changing things together. And what we found again is there was a tipping point at 45 intersections per square kilometre. If you go above that, you get a lot more walking. And then obviously quality public transport is key. So I'm going to end with the meme, because my kids love memes. My recommendations are what we need to ditch today. We need to stop expanding suburbs and greenfields, just stop. And along with it, stop building new roads. Stop all that massive road spend. You don't need to keep expanding wider and wider. We know it just induces demand. Just all those things just need to end today. And flying, sorry, I did fly here. And then what are we going to dig? Infill mixed-use development, reallocating streets for humans. Now, 20% of transport budgets on walking and cycling seems like an utter pipe dream to us in this part of the planet. But that is exactly what the UK is doing. Ireland has 20% of their transport budget on walking and cycling. Wales has announced that in order to maintain their Paris-compliant carbon budget, they're not going to build any more new roads. They're done. And they're switching that funding to walking and cycling. Same with Sweden, they spend 18% of their transport budget on walking and cycling. It can be done. And then obviously public transport goes hand in hand with all of that. Every public transport trip starts with walking and cycling, and so when we think about public transport, we need to be thinking about walking and cycling as well. That's it, thank you very much.